we'll discuss what SRL is. So self-regulated learning is shortened to SRL. You'll hear that a whole bunch. How we use it here at the Baton Rouge Youth Coalition, and then potential applications for SRL. And then we'll have our resources at the end, and then also time for questions, and hopefully offer you all up some further recommendations and ideas. So who we are, my name is Rachel Stevens. I am the Director of Writing here at the Baton Rouge Youth Coalition, aka BRIC. I've been with the organization for going on 5 years now. I currently work with the college team on student college applications, particularly the writing piece. But prior to joining BRIC, I was actually at LSU for about 5 years. I was a teacher in the English department, and actually a former tutor with CCACSA. So I was a strategy tutor over in CCACSA for a bit.
And I am Allie Diefendorf, Chief of Programs at BRIC, so I oversee all of our 8th through 12th grade programming. And Rachel and I are here today because we have been at BRIC since the beginning of our time together about 5 years ago, building our self-regulated learning curriculum. And it is really exciting to see how far it's come from our early days. It is something that we were using with just our 9th and 10th graders for a while, and is now something that we're using across the from all 8th through 12th grade. And then we know now we have college students who are all over the country using self-regulated learning, because it has been around just long enough that those who are freshmen this year are using those study skills. So really excited to dive in with y'all today. All right, I'm going to give you a little bit. So some of you may know BRIC, some of you may not. I actually see a couple BRIC mentors in here, which is really exciting. So feel free to add anything else in the chat if I'm missing anything. But BRIC, or the Baton Rouge Youth Coalition, is a free program supporting under-resourced youth excel in, enter, persist through, and graduate from college and secure on-track job. So once you are a BRIC fellow, that's how we refer to our students, you are literally never gone from us, which is our alumni network is constantly growing, and we're constantly following them everywhere, whether that's to LSU or out of the country. I'm going to give you a little bit of a look at who our fellows are. So we are here at BRIC. We have 3 locations: downtown, Airline, our newest location, and then we have a very small location in Iberville. Everyone at each of those locations is in 8th through 12th grade. Almost 100% of our fellows are Pell eligible, and then so demonstrating that need, and then they are committed. So just the expectation is that they're showing up 80% of the time to our weekly programming. We know our programming works. We'll share a little bit about that with you today. I would love to be able to share. I could have a whole session on that and how our programming works, but you'll see a bit there. And then finally, what happens at BRIC. So just some historical context. BRIC, when I first started about 5 years ago, the big focus was on that college application piece, because that was what felt important at the time, right? Was getting senior year, getting our kids to college. We have since moved away from that because of our self-regulated learning model, and are focusing really heavily with our 8th through 10th graders, building those self-regulated foundations so that they're able to apply them in 11th grade, apply them in 12th grade, and make that senior year as smooth and easy as possible with the college application process. So in 8th through 10th grade, our fellows are focused on learning what self-regulated learning is. Even if you don't know what that is in this moment, you can kind of understand with that self-regulated piece, and maybe if you know anything about 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, you know that's the group that needs it the most. So building those foundational skills then. 11th grade is focused completely on the ACT prep. But what I think sets our program apart from any other ACT prep program is we've married SRL with ACT prep. And I'll speak more to that in a little bit, but to me, that is what sets us apart. And our ACT score is about 3 points above the national average. And we actually, in this most recent round of ACT testing, saw the most growth that we have ever seen. If you know anything about the ACT, 1 or 2 points is pretty typical. We're around 4 points of growth right now, which is kind of unbelievable. And then finally, senior year is that entire college application process. So anything from applying to good fit schools, figuring out what a good fit school is, visiting schools, writing essays, scholarships, whether they're super competitive or I'm just clicking a link. So financial aid, FAFSA, anyone knows anything about FAFSA right now, we're working really hard, just like you all are probably in this room to navigate that. And then college and beyond persistence, we're following you through college, visiting with you, checking with you constantly, making sure you're persisting through whether it's 2 years, 4 years, more than that, and then securing those on track careers. And so that's a look at what our programming is. There's a lot more in all of that, but that's a broad overview. I'm going to turn it back to Miss Rachel to tell us about SRL.
Awesome, thank you. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to break down kind of the pedagogical background of what it is we're saying when we're saying SRL or when we're saying self-regulated learning. So the SRL approach is one that is all about putting, well, you'll hear me say fellows because that's, like Allie said, that's just what we call our students. But it's putting students in the driver's seat of their learning process. And we're making this sticky for y'all by having a very helpful little icon here of someone in a car. So, but what it's based in is empowering students to be in control of their learning process. And the way that self-regulated learning techniques are applied, it's through various metacognitive, motivational, and behavioral developments. So whether that's small scale and assignment specific study techniques, which we're going to take a look at later on, whether it's organizational and goal setting structures, so slightly bigger picture structures within which the study techniques live, and then finally that big picture growth mindset development. And all of these three components work together in order to foster a more holistic student learning support. And it's designed so that you create students that are really able to actively participate in their learning, but then also apply that active learning to different areas of their life. So that's really the beyond the classroom component there. So you want to create students who can self-advocate, who are self-sufficient, and who are really able to kind of critically think through problems as they come up and also have a growth mindset as problems arise. So we're going to focus mostly on the goal setting structure and the study techniques. So what I'm going to do next is break down what SRL based studying looks like. And so this next slide here, you'll see that we have a 3-step piece here. So whatever your study session is about, whether you have 20 minutes to spend on algebra or you have an hour to spend on World War II test review, when you are studying as a self-regulated learner, you are using these 3 steps so that you are able to actively learn. So one of the things that we know can happen with some of our learners is they're given the task to go study for this test or go write this paper or go review this chapter. But that's all the instruction that they're given. That's all the guidance that they're given. What SRL does is it gives them the how. So it's the tools on how you're actually going to go and learn the things so that you're truly mastering the material that you're learning instead of just completing learning tasks. So you're not just completing homework, you're actually mastering learning the material in the homework. So breaking down that 3-step process, step number 1, super crucial, you need to make a plan. And the next slide will break down what that means more in detail. Once you have your plan, the next step is what's called the self-monitoring step. So this is where you are actually engaging with the study materials for however long that study session is. And it's called self-monitor because this is where that active participation comes in. So you're not just kind of passively reviewing notes, you're using the plan that you made and you're putting those tools and those processes to work in that step 2. Then last, step 3 is the self-assess. So once you've had your study time, the last component that you need to do is check in with yourself on where you're at with that information. So you assess your progress at the end of time, and then you determine what concepts need more review and what concepts you actually have that really good mastery over. And by using that last component, you're able to scaffold different study sessions with this process. So if I end my algebra time realizing that I need more time with quadratic formulas, I'm going to take that information into my next time with algebra so that I can revisit those quadratic formulas. All right, so here it is in a little bit more detail. So when I'm in that step 1 planning step, and say I have 30 minutes to spend on algebra, my step 1 should take about 5 minutes here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, 1, set a goal for what I need to learn. All right, I'm doing algebra. I'm doing chapter 2 of algebra. That's what I need to learn. I need to go through the concepts in chapter 2. And then I'm going to choose the active strategies that work best for me. So maybe in this session, I have decided that the active strategy I need to revisit my notes from class, and I'm going to rewrite my notes as a study method, because we know that when we rewrite things, it's actually a way for our brain to relearn things, especially handwritten. So once I've made my plan, I know what I'm going to try to accomplish, and I know how I'm going to try to accomplish it. That's when I move on to step 2, that active study phase. And again, if I have 30 minutes, this is going to be where I'm spending 20 minutes of my time. This is the bulk of the time doing the actual learning process. So I'm going to use my strategies. So I decided in step 1, I'm taking notes. I'm going to spend that 20 minutes rewriting my notes as a form of studying. And then the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to be checking in with myself along the way. So at BRIC, we call it the inner voice, and we have our fellows give their inner voices names and personalities and all that good stuff. But essentially, the inner voice is the inner tutor, it's the inner teacher, it's the inner guidance where you're not just kind of passively just writing down your notes. As you're writing, you're stopping and kind of checking in with yourself. Okay, am I really paying attention to what I'm writing, or am I getting distracted by my highlighters? I 100% was a distracted by highlighters student, and I am now a 100% distracted by highlighters adult. Okay, maybe I need to put my highlighters away because the pretty colors aren't helping me with my formulas, right? I'm checking in, and is the music that I'm listening to distracting me? Am I more listening to my music, or is it helping me to focus? Maybe I need to turn the music off. Maybe the music's okay. And even checking in with your physical state. So am I getting distracted by the chair that I'm sitting in? Am I getting distracted by the temperature that I'm at? And just making those adjustments so that you can really stay focused in on the task at hand. And then at the end of that work time, there's that step 3 piece. So I'm spending that last 5 minutes of my 30-minute time with that self-assessment. And one of the best ways to self-assess is to just test yourself on that knowledge. So maybe it's a couple of practice problems. Maybe if you made flashcards, it's running through your flashcards. And the idea is at the end of that self-assessment, you have a really good idea of, this is what I feel really solid on, and this is what I feel that I need to keep working on. And so then I know the next time I come to this subject, next time I come to a study session with this material, I know where I'm going to pick up from where I left off. So this is SRL in a study session. This is the kind of fundamental way that you can use SRL to engage that kind of active learning. But SRL extends beyond studying as well, because it really is that holistic approach to creating that self-regulated driver's seat student. So there are different pieces of SRL that extend beyond those study sessions in order to help students really take ownership over their processes. So one of them includes planner use. We are obsessed with planners here at BRIC. We live our planners. We love our planners. Planners are life. One of the reasons why planners are so important is because you can't take ownership over what you're doing if you don't know what you have to do. And planners are really, really great for making sure that you're staying on top of everything. Another SRL practice that is beyond just the study sessions is reflection writing. So whatever subject it is, whatever course it is, there's always room for reflection writing. And we're going to talk more about how reflection fits in when we get into some specific examples. But the idea here is you can't really fully look back on where you've been in order to best go forward without kind of taking that pause and having that reflection time. So it's a really useful tool to be able to do that kind of check-in with yourself and see how things are going. And reflection writing fits within goal setting structures. So a big piece of SRL is to be able to have a line of sight through setting goals, setting intentions, so that you know what you're working towards in order to be able to best work towards it. And then lastly, procrastination busting strategies. I think if we were to take an honest poll in this room, we all have our favorite ways of procrastination. If you say, no, I don't procrastinate, nobody wants you in the room because you are a unicorn, not a human. So knowing the ways in which we procrastinate, knowing the ways in which we don't maximize our time is really, really helpful for us to be able to make the best use of our time and work through the reasons why we might be holding back on starting something or completing something. So that is kind of the foundation of SRL in a nutshell. This is by no means a comprehensive list of different practices, but these are some of the kind of top tier practices that we've noticed that when you can implement these, they are very effective. And speaking of how we implement different practices, I'm going to pass the mic back over to Allie. She's going to walk us through a bit about how we use SRL here at BRIC.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. All right, I am going to start with our 8th through 10th graders. Again, for those of you that are just joining us, our 8th through 10th graders, that's when we are learning the foundations of self-regulated learning. So truly, what is it and how are we applying it to our lives? Again, this list is not exhaustive, but it's some of the key things we're using with those 8th through 10th graders. Very first thing is we're starting the semester learning how to take effective notes and effectively use a planner. So we use Cornell style notes with our fellows. It is something that they learn how to do early on. I'm currently teaching our juniors, and to see how far they've come with the Cornell notes is honestly incredible. So it takes a lot of time, but it's really effective, and you can see that supporting their growth in the classroom. We also spend the first few weeks on learning how to effectively write down, we say, your whats and your whens. So how to use a planner in a way that isn't just in a really exciting, I have this really cute planner with really cute colorful pens. What am I going to do with it? So writing down the whats and whens. By that we mean, what am I doing and when am I going to do it? Perfect segue into spacing, study, and work time. Again, what am I doing and when am I going to do it? So something we spend a lot of time with is mapping out, we create spacing plans. And so what that is I know that I have a test in 2 weeks on Unit 7. I am chunking my studying from now until Unit 7. So it's a way for me to keep absorb more information. This isn't revolutionary. We all know that cramming does not work. It is not an effective study tool. Rachel will share more with us about that later. But it's chunking your studying. So it's part of that planning process. We're literally always planning. We are learning active study sessions. So we're using that self-regulated learning cycle. And during that ACT session or the self-monitor session, we are identifying active study skills. We are not opening a book and just reading the textbook and hoping that we get an A on our test. We are learning about teach to learn, which we'll share more about later, but that's something that's carrying through across the board. Teaching to learn is the idea that I should be able to teach what I am learning. And that's a really like the easiest way for me to identify gaps in knowledge. If I can teach you about chapter 2 algebra, then if I can teach you completely, I should be able to do pretty well on this test. If there's things that I'm missing or I have to go back and look in my notes for, that is a thing that I need to go and study and add to that scaffolding piece, add to my next study session. We talk about making productive mistakes. So we do a really great job of talking about productive versus unproductive mistakes. You can ask any of our kid, was that a productive or unproductive mistake? They're going to tell you what that is. And that is that we all make mistakes. We all should be making mistakes. Our brains grow that way. But what is it that we're doing with those mistakes? How am I making that a productive, using what's in my locus of control to do something about that mistake? And then finally, the self-advocacy development. We're working really hard with our younger students to build self-advocates. And so whether that is, I need to go talk to a teacher about a class I'm struggling with, or I need to talk to my mom about maybe not going to choir practice tonight and staying home to complete some homework, walking through those respectful ways to self-advocate. In 11th grade, it looks really similar to 8th through 10th grade, where we're using those self-regulated learning skills, just matching it with the ACT instead of their coursework. So we are setting ACT goals at the beginning of the semester. We know when we're taking the ACT. If our test is in December and it is now September, I'm saying that I want to grow a realistic amount of points. So maybe 1 or 2 points. I want to go from an 18 to a 19 or an 18 to a 20. And what are those action steps? We're setting out clear, realistic actions. So things like I'm going to study using UWorld as the platform we use for 15 minutes twice a week. I'm not saying I'm going to study 4 hours a night, because it's not realistic. And so really holding each other accountable with that. Repeated ACT content exposure. We know the more we see things, the better we are with it. And then those active ACT skills practice. So not only are our fellows using UWorld, they're really taking their time to reflect on what's working, what's not working. In a session, they are answering those ACT questions, they're getting immediate feedback, and then they're writing down things when they get them wrong, why they got it wrong, and what they're doing next time. So figuring those things out. And then with that also being paired with a mentor who's holding them accountable as they're learning those skills. And then finally, 12th grade, while we're not learning new things academically in 12th grade, SRL is still wildly important as part of our application completion, writing development, and reflection. So for application completion, we know when an application's due, we know when a scholarship is due. We're not waiting until the night before things are due, and really making a space study plan or a space work plan to make that happen. You're doing that at both the very beginning of the session. So what am I getting done in the next 3 hours? And then also, what am I getting done in the next 3 weeks? It's easy for me then to go back into my planner and find out what it is I need to do each night of the week or every other night of the week, whatever it is that my process is. Working really hard on writing development, and then that reflection piece. Reflection shows up everywhere because we know is one of the best ways to grow. And then finally, across all grades, we have our tutoring sessions where our tutors are expected to use the self-regulated learning cycle with their fellows. So we're never sitting down and diving right into the work. We're always making that plan first. We're self-monitoring. Our tutors and mentors are trained to ask those questions as we go. What's working? What's not working? What do we need to change? Self-advocacy assistance, planning, again, you see that happens everywhere, and then the time management development. And so really thinking early on, because time management is something that I think a lot of kids wait until they get into college to figure out how to do, and we're training our 8th graders early on to figure out how to manage their time. I'm letting Miss Rachel take the mic
Yes,
here.
it is. Yep. Awesome. Thank you, Miss Allie. And we just did it. So I was going to say at the top, we go by Miss Allie and Miss Rachel with our fellows. So that is how we also will just reference each other when the fellows are not around. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to walk us through different potential SRL applications that, whether you're a K through 12 teacher, a university level instructor, or in student support services like a tutoring center, hopefully you'll be able to take something away from this section that you didn't already know, or that you might want to try tweaking and applying. And I'm going to say at the top that this is not an exhaustive list. SRL is very extensive, and there's lots of different approaches that you can take. And we could stay here all day. We could do a seminar every single week on it. So this is going to be very kind of top level, and then we'll go into as much detail as we can, just knowing that there's always more details and there's always more information out there. So with that, we're going to start in the classroom. And so I'm going to start in the classroom with some structural components, and then we'll take a look at some specific activities. So one of the kind of top level things that you can do to have your classroom be a little bit more SRL friendly is starting with the developmental and academic goals of the class. And so when we say developmental, especially with K through 12, we're thinking about those social emotional skills developments. We're thinking about what students need to be working on outside of their textbooks. And then the academic goals are the pieces within the textbooks, right? So thinking of those goals, starting there, and then figuring out where you can incorporate corresponding SRL components into the curriculum to be able to help bolster those developmental goals and those academic goals. Another thing that structurally can work really, really well to build in that SRL focus is to structure independent work time using the SRL model. And this can fit in regardless of your subject and regardless of really how much independent work time your students have available to them. So, for example, with my time at LSU when I was an English instructor, they would have independent work time to work on drafting. So at the top of the drafting session, we're going to start with, okay, what is the goal that we're trying to achieve in the next 20 minutes of time? And we're going to set that intention. Okay, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. And then during that actual work time, myself as the teacher, I'm going to be walking around kind of being their outer inner voice. So checking in, seeing how the process is going, seeing where those areas of kind of stuckness can pop up with our ideas development, but then also helping them to develop that inner voice where they're able to recognize where they're getting stuck as well. And then being able to build in that either self-assessment or that self-reflection time at the end of an independent work session. It can be as simple as, okay, what progress did we make? What are we currently struggling with? What do we want to do next? So what progress did we make? What are we currently struggling with? What do we want to do next? If you have no other time to have any other reflection, those 3 questions are really, really good to ask. Again, having the students create that inner voice and then being that external inner voice. And then another component here is using goal setting, particularly at the start of major projects, at the start of units, and at the start of semesters. So for example, one of the things that I did as an English instructor is we started the year by writing a letter to their future selves. And I told them that they were going to get this letter back on the last day of class. And they did, in fact, get that letter back on the last day of class. And part of that letter was setting intentions for the semester. What kind of writing skills did they want to acquire? What kind of student did they want to grow into, especially my first semester freshmen? And then building in benchmark checks. So it's great to set a goal in August for December. It's even better when you have benchmarks throughout the way so that they're checking in on their progress. So for my English class, we did mid-semester reflections, and we took that time in the middle of the semester to reflect on, okay, this was the goal that I set. How is it going? What changes do I want to make moving forward? And then last but not least here, and this is more of kind of a learning concept, but it applies to structuring work time, structuring focus time, is that idea of wells, not sponges that Allie mentioned earlier. So when we cram for our work, we are treating our brain like a sponge. We are filling it to max capacity, usually overflowing. If you ask any student after they've come out of a cram session and say, how do you feel? And they say, my brain is leaking out my ears, right? That's the sponge effect. They take all of that information, they dump it into a test, they walk out of that test, their brain rings out, and that information is gone. That is the opposite of what we want to have happen. So to be able to build in a brains as wells structure where you are creating a deep well of knowledge that the student can then take their bucket, dip in, and pick out a little piece of information that they need because it's securely down in that well. That's what we're going for. And you can achieve this using that kind of spaced studying approach where you're having students revisit information more than just once. and teaching them, especially in the lower grades, teaching them how to use things like a planner, how to do things like time management so that they're not cramming the night before. They've seen this information multiple times, ideally over multiple weeks, so that it really just gets poured down into that well and it is stuck there. So no sponge wringing here. So these are some kind of higher level applications. Now some classroom actions or activities that help to support this kind of application. So number one, it's one of my favorites, think, pair, share. It is not reinventing the wheel. It is just giving students the opportunity to process information by talking through it. So say you have them read a passage, or say you have them complete a math problem, that's the think part of it. Then the pair part is you're turning to your shoulder partner and you're talking it out with your person next to you. You're comparing answers if it's an answer-based situation. You're talking through the approach that you took. You're having that time to share out your initial reactions to something that you read. And then the share piece is when you bring the whole group together to be able to share out thoughts. And one of the things I really like about the think, pair, share is that it gives even the introverted learners time to process independently with the think portion, and time to talk it out on a one-on-one basis so that they don't go from inside their brains to in front of the entire classroom really quickly. Another piece, so I said before that reflection is super crucial. One of the ways in which reflection is very, very, very effective is exam reflections and self-assessment. So this is actually particularly helpful if you have smaller scale exams. So say you have tests leading up or quizzes leading up to a big unit test. If you can have quiz reflection time where they're able to process particularly what they got wrong in order to know what they need to keep working on, it's going to help them use those quizzes as real true assessment tools. So they're using the smaller scale, kind of lower risk situations to help them figure out what they need to know more and what they're really solid on. And you can use them as kind of a scaling option to lead up to those bigger unit tests or those midterms or those finals, where we know, especially at the kind of higher level, that sometimes those classes, so much gets weighted in those midterms and those finals. So if you have those smaller scale options to give them reflection time, review what they got right, and then really be able to review what they got wrong, it can be a very effective self-assessment tool. Goal setting activities. So I know I've brought these up here because you'll see the same kind of thing pop up again and again because it's really at the core of the work. When we say goal setting activities, the key component here is that it includes action steps. So part of being the active learner is having action steps. So if I'm setting an objective, for example, to write a very strong thesis on my next paper, my objective is, okay, my goal, I want a really strong thesis statement for my second essay this semester. My next question is, what am I doing to achieve that goal? What am I doing to be able to have a really strong thesis statement? Action step number one, maybe I'm making an appointment with the writing center to talk with a writing tutor about what I'm going, like, hey, I need help with my thesis. This is what I've got. Can you help me out? Action step number two, I'm going to my professor's office hours. I'm talking it out with them. That's also a fantastic self-advocacy component because you're creating that relationship with your professor. So really formulating those action steps to meet the objective. This can be a large scale opportunity, or this can be a smaller scale. You can use goal setting activities at the top of projects, at the starts of units. And again, it's just keyed into helping the students feel like they have control and they have an active participation in what they're working on. Reflection writing here. So I know I already mentioned those letters to past and future selves. So those are really great for that larger scale timeline. Also, reflections at the ends of things. So letters to next year's students. These are really helpful for like end of semester activities where you can have your students write to the next cohort and get them thinking about, okay, what did I learn What did I do that worked really well? If I could go back in time and do it again, what would I do differently? And again, it's just really getting them in that driver's seat of, hey, I'm an expert on what my experience was, and now I'm going to help pass that knowledge on to somebody else. But also a piece of that is I'm going to pass that knowledge on to my future self. So the next class that I take, the next semester that I'm in, I've now reflected on what I want to do differently too. And then on a much smaller scale, post-assignment journaling. So this can apply to any subject, and it's a really, really great tool for getting them to check in with themselves on what they thought they knew, what they actually knew, and how they're feeling about things. So we use post-assignment journaling even in our ACT work, where we always have some reflection component where they're thinking about how comfortable do you feel with the material, how confident do you feel with the material, and kind of tracking that comfortability so the next time they see that concept, they can check in on where they left off with it. All right, teach to learn. We've already touched a little bit on this, but this stems from, we know that the number one way that you can check if you know something, really, really know something, is if you can teach it to somebody else. And I apologize, there is a vacuum in the background. So teach to learn opportunities in classroom, you can use peer teach to learn. So if you're having a review session for a test, part of that review session, have each student or have groups of students take one piece of the unit, take one concept, and they are now in charge of teaching that concept to another cohort of students, to the rest of the class of students. It's really great because the students who are listening are getting a chance to engage with that material. And when we teach, for my teachers in the room, when you're teaching, you can feel it in your body, right? You can feel it all over when you have just strayed into those weeds just a little bit and you no longer really quite know what you're talking about anymore. And then as professional educators, we're able to rein it on back, and our students usually never know the difference. But when you're a student using Teach to Learn as an assessment method for yourself, they can use that physical feeling. Oh, I physically felt really uncomfortable when I got into quadratic formulas. I'm going to make sure that I keep working on quadratic formulas. So they get that kind of haptic feedback for being able to know what they feel comfortable in and what they don't. But also Teach to Learn is a great study tool. If you don't have time in the classroom to really use this as a peer activity, you can teach the concept and give them the challenge of teaching to learn as a homework study tool. You don't need to talk to another human in order to be able to do Teach to Learn. Walls are really great listeners. You can talk to the wall. My mother, I learned very recently, hates history. You never would have guessed it because I taught to learn all of my AP history classes when I was in high school, and she was a very good listener. Now I find out that she didn't care about any of it, but she didn't need to, and she didn't need to know what I was talking about because it was just having that someone to listen and just knowing that there were ears taking my information because I just needed to talk it out. And that was helpful for me to figure out what was going on. And then lastly here, homework as productive mistakes. So this is where if you can incorporate in-class review time, this can be super, super useful, but it's a really great check for the kind of knowledge gap. So you can use homework as, instead of students just feeling like, oh, this is busy work, it's okay, I'm gonna be self-assessing. I'm gonna treat my homework like a little mini quiz because I'm just being graded on completion maybe, but I'm going to treat it like this is a little mini quiz because I know that when I bring my work in, we're going to have some in-class review time so that I can really check what I understood and what I need to keep working on for understanding. All right, so next component here, and I'm gonna move a little bit quickly because my little timer is showing me where we're at, and I want to make sure that we can talk through everything. So tutoring sessions. This is going to look at both what you can do if you coordinate tutors and also what you can do as a tutor. So number one thing, structure your session work time around that SRL study model. So you're opening with making a plan, you're deciding on what resources you're going to use, you're having that active work time, and then you're leaving time at the end for the self-assessment and review component. In order to do this, you want to position tutors to support active learning strategies. So training tutors on that plan, act, reflect session model. And if you have an hour-long session, we're taking the first 10 minutes to make a plan, we're working for, say, 40 minutes, and then we're taking that last 10 minutes for that reflection piece. Also providing tutors with study resources and strategies so that when students come in and they say, I know I need to work on this, but I don't even know where to start, tutors can say, we can make flashcards, we can make a Quizlet, we can recopy your notes from class, we can do teach to learn, and you can just talk it through with me. So giving tutors those kinds of tools in order to be able to be kind of a resource bank for the students when they see them. And then also acting as that inner voice. So tutors knowing what to look for. If it looks like a student is getting more distracted by their highlighter colors than actually the words that the highlighters are highlighting. Helping the student stay focused by clearing out the workspace so that you have what you need to work on and only what you need to work on. So helping to keep them focused, keep them on track, make sure that what they're doing is working. Also using those SRL reflection notes, so that last 10 minutes of self-assessment and reflection, to scaffold subsequent sessions. So I know, for example, at CCACSA, a lot of tutors work with the same students for an entire semester. They might see them twice a week for the entire semester. That SRL reflection piece is so helpful to set up the next session. So, okay, we left off with you didn't feel comfortable looking at World War II in your class, let's start there again, and being able to build those sessions. Tutor, teach to learn. I already covered this one, but you can be a great pair of ears and you don't need to be a subject content expert. In fact, it actually works better sometimes when you're not the content expert, because then you can tell where you need further explanation and you can prompt the student to give further explanation. And then lastly, incorporate time for long-term planning. So I like to do a 2-week check. We are always planning 2 weeks ahead. 2 weeks is a really good time frame to be able to build out space study plans for upcoming exams, build out space work plans for upcoming assignments. And it's far enough ahead that it's meaningful, and it's not so far ahead that it's just kind of dates on the page. All right, and then I'm going to turn it over to Miss Allie for our last slide here of info.
All right, y'all, wrapping up with general academic support. Also just general life support as you're talking with any of your students. We maybe you haven't gathered that today because we haven't had all day with you, but SRL is something that you can use literally everywhere in your life. So one thing is talking about and really starting to help your students become aware of locus of control. So that is really identifying what is truly in their control versus what is out of their control, and what is it that they're doing about it, taking that to the next level, where a lot of our students don't have teachers. That's out of their control, but what is in their control is how they're choosing to study, how they're choosing to learn, how they're choosing to self-advocate, and going from there, having those productive conversations. The targeted goal setting, so those objective key results and actions. What is it that is a very clear goal in this next specific time frame, and what are the actions that I need to actually get there? Who is holding me accountable with those actions? Who's walking me through that? Long-term and major project planning, again, it's that space studying where we're chunking and we're making things go as smoothly as possible. We're being a well in all of our parts of our life and not a sponge. This can be from anything from college applications, capstone projects, midterms, finals. And we have mentors who have come to me that have been in my program. They're studying for the GRE, and they're like, oh, I'm so happy that I'm in this program because now I get to study, use these skills to study for what I'm studying for in my real life, which is so exciting to hear. And then that growth mindset development support. So always having those, supporting those productive mistakes. We as educators position ourselves to be super positive with our students as they're making mistakes. It is an easy way to talk about your brain growth. No problem. You made a mistake. What is it we're doing about it? And again, that doesn't have to be academics. That can be literally any mistake that someone's making. And then finally, framing that feedback as an opportunity for improvement, where you're giving someone feedback as a way to say, I care about you, I love you, I want to see you grow, and I wouldn't give you feedback otherwise, which I think is really important. That is, we have 1 minute for questions and answers. I'm going to let y'all, if you have any questions, you can put in the chat, but otherwise, Rachel's going to share the next slide. I'm going to still let you all put things in the chat, but I do want to extend a very heartfelt thank you to you all. I know there was a million other places you could have been today and a bunch of other sessions you could have been in, and you chose to be in ours, and we're really grateful for that. Please feel free to reach out to either one of us, Rachel or Allie, at thebryc.org. And then finally, my last few seconds here, a shameless plug. If you want to come learn more about how this self-regulated learning works in actions from 8th through 12th grade, please come consider mentoring with us. It is a 75-minute once-a-week commitment, and the QR code is there, or thebryc.org/volunteer. Really appreciate you all. I'm very grateful for your time, and I hope to be in touch with you all in the future.